Picture this: a fortress under siege, the air thick with smoke, and the deafening roar of cannon fire, soldiers scrambling to hold their ground. It's a scene of chaos, of desperation, where the fate of empires hangs in the balance. But what if I told you that from this very moment of destruction, something extraordinary would emerge? Not a monument to victory or defeat, but something far more unexpected. A garden so stunning, so serene, it would become known as the most beautiful in all of Europe. This is the story of how war's failure gave birth to nature's triumph, a tale where history and horticulture collide in the most breathtaking way. You might wonder, how could something so violent, so fraught with struggle, lead to such unparalleled beauty? It's a question that takes us deep into the heart of human ambition, where even the grandest plans can unravel, only to reveal something far more magnificent. The siege we're about to explore was meant to be a decisive blow, a moment that would reshape the map of Europe. Instead, it became the unlikely cradle of a masterpiece, a place where the scars of battle were softened by the gentle touch of time and the vision of those who saw potential where others saw only ruin. This isn't just a story about a garden, it's a story about resilience, about how the most unexpected outcomes can arise from the ashes of what was supposed to be. As we journey through the events that led to this transformation, you'll discover the hidden threads connecting warfare and artistry, destruction and creation. By the end, you'll see this garden not just as a place of beauty, but as a living testament to the twists of fate and how sometimes the most enduring legacies are born not from success, but from failure. So let's step back in time to the moment when cannons fell silent and something far more extraordinary began to grow. The year was 1529, and the powerful Ottoman Empire, led by the ambitious Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, set its sights on Vienna, the very heart of Europe. This was no ordinary target. Vienna stood as the gateway between East and West, a prize that could shift the balance of power across the continent. The Ottomans, with their vast armies and fearsome reputation, were confident in their ability to crush the city's defenses. But what unfolded would become one of history's most dramatic sieges, a clash of wills, tactics, and sheer endurance that would defy all expectations. Vienna's defenders, a mix of local forces and hastily assembled reinforcements, were outnumbered and outgunned. The Ottomans brought with them the latest in siege technology, including massive cannons capable of reducing stone walls to rubble. Yet from the very beginning, the campaign was plagued by misfortune. Heavy autumn rains turned the roads to mud, slowing the advance of Ottoman supply wagons and leaving their troops exhausted before the fighting even began. Then, as the siege dragged on, disease swept through the Ottoman ranks, thinning their numbers and sapping morale. Meanwhile, the Viennese, though battered and starving, refused to yield. Their determination was fueled by desperation. They knew surrender meant annihilation. The turning point came when a small band of relief forces, led by the Duke of Lorraine, managed to break through Ottoman lines. This unexpected assault, combined with dwindling supplies and the approaching winter, forced Suleiman to make a fateful decision. After weeks of brutal fighting, he ordered a retreat, abandoning the siege in the dead of night. The Ottomans left behind not just their dead, but something far more surprising: vast stores of exotic plants, seeds, and even skilled gardeners who had traveled with the army. These treasures, intended to cultivate Ottoman gardens in a conquered Vienna, would instead take root in the very soil they failed to claim. What seemed like a humiliating defeat for the Ottomans became a hidden gift for Europe. The abandoned gardens flourished, blending Eastern and Western horticultural traditions in ways no one could have predicted. It was as if the earth itself had decided to transform the scars of war into something alive, something beautiful. And so, from this failed siege, something extraordinary began to grow, not just plants, but a legacy of resilience and renewal that would endure for centuries. The retreat of the Ottoman forces was anything but orderly. Under the cover of darkness, they torched their own camps, leaving behind smoldering ruins and a landscape stripped bare. The once proud siegeworks trenches, artillery positions, and makeshift bridges stood abandoned, silent witnesses to an ambition that had crumbled. For the people of Vienna, emerging from their battered city walls, the scene was one of eerie desolation. Fields that had been trampled by thousands of boots now lay choked with ash and debris. Yet amid this devastation, something peculiar caught their eye. Patches of vibrant green where the Ottomans' carefully tended garden plots had survived the flames. These gardens were no accident. The Ottomans had traveled with more than just weapons. They brought an entire ecosystem of plants, seeds, and even soil from their homelands, meant to sustain them during the campaign and eventually to beautify their new territories. Among the scorched earth, delicate tulip bulbs, fragrant herbs, and fruit saplings had somehow endured. Local farmers and healers, curious about these foreign species, began collecting them, unaware they were handling the seeds of a horticultural revolution. What followed was a quiet but profound exchange. Ottoman gardeners left behind or captured during the retreat shared their knowledge with Viennese cultivators, blending techniques from two worlds. The terraced irrigation systems of the East met the orderly beds of European gardens. Plants once considered exotic apricots, lilacs, and even the first coffee beans to reach Central Europe found new roots in Austrian soil. This accidental cultural exchange turned the battlefield into a living laboratory, where the very symbols of invasion became gifts of renewal. The failure of the siege, rather than marking an end, became a beginning. Where others saw only wreckage, a handful of forward-thinking individuals recognized opportunity. The land itself seemed to agree. Within a few growing seasons, the scars of war were softened by blossoms. It was as if nature had declared its own truce, weaving together the strands of two clashing civilizations into something harmonious. This unlikely fusion would eventually give rise to the Imperial Gardens of Vienna, a masterpiece born not from conquest, but from the stubborn persistence of life itself. At first, the land around Vienna bore the brutal marks of war, trampled earth, charred timber, and the skeletal remains of siege engines. But as seasons turned, something remarkable happened. Nature, indifferent to human conflict, began its quiet work of reclamation. Weeds sprouted through cracks in abandoned fortifications, their roots slowly breaking apart stones that had once defied cannon fire. Wildflowers, carried by the wind or dropped by birds, colonized the scarred earth in bursts of color, softening the harsh lines of destruction. Vines crept up crumbling walls, weaving living tapestries over the scars of battle. What had been a wasteland of human ambition became a sanctuary for life stubbornly pushing through. For the locals, this transformation was impossible to ignore. Farmers returning to their fields found the soil richer than before, fertilized by the ashes of burned supplies and the decay of abandoned organic matter. Healers noticed new plants thriving where none had grown before, species brought by the Ottomans, now naturalizing in the unfamiliar climate. Even the children playing among the ruins sensed the shift, plucking strange fruits from bushes that hadn't existed a year earlier. The land wasn't just healing, it was evolving, blending the old and the new into something entirely unexpected. Among those who took notice was a small group of monks from a nearby monastery. Skilled in herbology, they recognized the value of these foreign plants, some medicinal, others edible, and began cataloging them with meticulous care. Their experiments in crossbreeding local and Ottoman varieties yielded hardier crops, flavors never before tasted in Europe. Meanwhile, wealthy landowners, inspired by the wild beauty overtaking the ruins, commissioned gardens that mimicked this untamed harmony. They hired the very Ottoman gardeners left behind, now free men, to design spaces where structured flower beds flowed seamlessly into wooded groves. This organic revival sparked a broader cultural shift. Where once the people of Vienna had seen only the trauma of invasion, they now began to associate the land with resilience, even possibility. The garden that would eventually rise here wasn't planned, it was discovered, a collaboration between human curiosity and nature's relentless creativity. The ruins, rather than being erased, became a foundation for something far more enduring. Walls that had failed to keep invaders out now supported roses. Trenches that once funneled soldiers brimmed with rainwater, reflecting the sky like a chain of tiny mirrors. Every scar left by war became a seam where two worlds grafted together, growing stronger than either could have alone. The lesson was subtle but profound. Destruction could be a beginning, not just an end. Where others saw only loss, those who tended this land found abundance. And as the garden grew, so did an unspoken understanding that beauty often emerges not despite chaos, but because of it. The most breathtaking landscapes sometimes owe their existence to the very forces that sought to erase them. Into this landscape of ruin and regrowth stepped a man whose name history nearly forgot, Lucas von Hohenburg, a minor noble with a passion for botany and a mind sharpened by loss. Unlike his peers who saw only the shame of invasion in Vienna's scarred outskirts, Lucas saw potential whispering through the weeds. His own family estate had been reduced to ashes during the siege, yet instead of rebuilding walls, he became obsessed with the Ottoman plants thriving among the wreckage. A self-taught naturalist with a merchant's eye, he recognized something revolutionary in these foreign species. They weren't just surviving, they were transforming the land. Lucas's vision was radical for its time. While most nobles poured their resources into fortifications or monuments, he petitioned Emperor Ferdinand I for rights to the abandoned siege grounds, arguing that a garden could heal what war had broken. Skeptics mocked his proposal, should we plant roses where cannons roared? But Lucas had a diplomat's patience and a gambler's instincts. He assembled a team of unlikely allies, a freed Ottoman gardener named Kemal, who taught him the art of terraced irrigation, local apothecaries hungry for new remedies, and even a handful of monks who believed cultivating beauty was an act of spiritual defiance. Together, they faced down ridicule and logistical nightmares, contaminated soil, harsh winters, and the ever-present specter of renewed conflict. What set Lucas apart wasn't just his perseverance, but his philosophy. Where others sought to erase the siege's memory, he insisted on honoring it. He designed winding paths that traced the original Ottoman trench lines, turning scars into storytelling features. Flower beds erupted in the geometric patterns of Islamic art, while European topiaries stood sentinel beside them, a living dialogue between enemies turned collaborators. Even the garden's centerpiece, a fountain fed by a restored Ottoman well, became a symbol. Water, not gunpowder, would have the final word. The challenges were relentless. Funding dried up twice, forcing Lucas to sell family heirlooms to pay the gardeners. A brutal frost in 1534 killed half the saplings, and whispers spread that the land was cursed. Yet each setback seemed to sharpen Lucas's vision. When critics accused him of cultivating the enemy's legacy, he countered that true strength lay in transforming wounds into wisdom. Slowly, stubbornly, the garden began to change minds. By the time the first tulips, a gift from Kemmel's smuggled bulbs, bloomed in a burst of crimson against Vienna's grey walls, even the doubters fell silent. Lucas never lived to see his garden celebrated as a masterpiece. He died in obscurity, his name fading into the soil he'd nurtured. But his greatest insight, that beauty could be an act of reconciliation, took root. The garden became a living bridge between worlds, where every petal carried the echo of a battle that had failed, and a dream that had not. Visitors today stroll past plaques bearing Ottoman calligraphy and Habsburg crests intertwined, unaware they're walking through one man's quiet revolution. For Lucas, the garden was never just about plants. It was proof that even in the aftermath of devastation, something new could grow, not by ignoring the past, but by weaving it into the roots of what came next. The garden's earliest blueprints were less about erasing history than reimagining it. Lucas and his team faced a landscape littered with siege remnants, partially collapsed towers, overgrown trenches, even rusting cannonballs half buried in the dirt. Where others saw debris, they saw raw materials. The design philosophy was radical for its time. Instead of clearing the wreckage, they would weave it into the garden's very bones. A toppled watchtower became the base for a cascading waterfall, its stones repurposed as stepping stones through fern groves. The deep gashes left by Ottoman sappers were transformed into sunken gardens, their walls lined with fragrant herbs that thrived in the sheltered microclimate. Even cannonballs found new life as decorative accents, embedded into pathways like metallic fossils hinting at the land's violent past. This wasn't mere recycling, it was alchemy. The designers understood that true beauty often lies in contrast. Delicate irises sprouted between cracks in mortar-stained bricks. A grove of silver birches, symbols of renewal in Slavic folklore, grew around the skeletal remains of a burned-out supply cart. Visitors strolling the paths would encounter these juxtapositions at every turn. The harsh angles of war machinery softened by draping wisteria, the echo of gunpowder replaced by the scent of Ottoman roses. The garden became a living palimpsest where every artifact told a story without drowning out nature's voice. Key to this approach was Kemmel's influence. He introduced the Islamic concept of ayni, yet harmony through balance, suggesting circular planting beds around artillery craters to symbolize wholeness emerging from rupture. Meanwhile, European designers contributed the idea of ruin value, deliberately preserving certain structures in their fractured state to evoke contemplation. The result was neither purely Eastern nor Western, but a third thing entirely, a landscape where history wasn't polished into prettiness, but allowed to breathe alongside new growth. The most striking example was the garden's centerpiece, the so-called Cannonball Pavilion. What began as a collapsed gun emplacement became an open-air structure where rusted munitions were suspended from the ceiling like chandeliers, surrounded by climbing hydrangeas. By day, sunlight filtered through the vines, casting dappled shadows on the iron spheres. By night, lanterns made the metal glow as if still warm from battle. It was both memorial and metamorphosis, proof that destruction and beauty could share the same space without canceling each other out. Critics initially called it morbid. But as the garden matured, even skeptics came to admire its layered storytelling. A child playing hide and seek among the trenches might later understand they'd been tracing the footsteps of soldiers. A couple picnicking by a reflecting pool would discover it followed the exact dimensions of an Ottoman siege trench. The garden didn't just incorporate history, it invited visitors to literally walk through it, blurring the line between past and present. This approach required staggering attention to detail. Lucas insisted on mapping every surviving siege feature before planting began, using eyewitness accounts to position flora symbolically. White lilies marked where medics had tended the wounded. Sturdy oaks were planted where defenders had made their last stand. The garden became a living archive where botany and memory grew intertwined. Over time, this philosophy would influence landscapes across Europe, proving that honoring history didn't require freezing it in amber sometimes. The most powerful tributes are those that keep evolving, petal by petal, season by season. Walking through the garden today feels like stepping into a living encyclopedia of botanical wonders, where each plant tells a story of survival, adaptation, and unexpected kinship. The most striking feature isn't just the diversity of species, but how they coexist. Tulips from the Ottoman Empire nodding gracefully beside alpine edelweiss, their petals brushing like old friends reunited after centuries apart. These weren't mere decorative choices, they were deliberate acts of botanical diplomacy. Take the Damascus rose, its crimson blooms a favorite of Ottoman perfumers. When Lucas first planted it alongside wild Austrian roses, skeptics warned the soils would never suit it. Yet the two varieties slowly hybridized, creating a hardier bloom that thrived in the borderlands between their origins. Then there are the trees, silent witnesses to the garden's evolution. The Persian silk tree, with its feathery pink blossoms, was thought too delicate for Central Europe's frosts until Kemal devised a way to shield its roots with heated stones from the siege-abandoned ovens. Now it towers over a grove of native beeches, its canopy aflutter with butterflies that never before ventured this far north. Nearby, a cluster of fig trees, grown from cuttings carried by Ottoman soldiers as portable sustenance, bears fruit so sweet it became a favorite of Habsburg emperors. What began as emergency rations for invaders became a symbol of shared delight. Perhaps no plant captures the garden spirit better than its rarest resident, the Anatolian snowdrop. This fragile white flower, normally found only on distant mountain slopes, was discovered sprouting near an Ottoman field hospital site. Monks mistook its appearance as divine intervention, a sign that healing could grow from hardship. Today, it blooms each spring in a dedicated glade, surrounded by medicinal herbs from both traditions, European chamomile and Ottoman sage growing side by side, their leaves whispering in the wind like a recipe for reconciliation. The garden's designers were masterful storytellers, using plants as their vocabulary. They planted poppies, symbols of fallen soldiers, along the edges of reflecting pools, so their reflections doubled the tribute. Jasmine vines, prized in Ottoman culture for evening fragrance, were trained over arches where Viennese lovers once exchanged vows under lantern light. Even the humble onion, a staple of both armies' rations, got its own bed, the purple-tinged Turkish varieties contrasting with golden Austrian ones, a playful nod to how hunger had united enemies. What makes this botanical tapestry extraordinary isn't just its beauty, but its resilience. These plants survived not just transplantation across continents, but the weight of human conflict. Their roots broke through layers of cannon smoke and blood-stained earth to reach for sunlight. In doing so, they became more than decorations. They transformed into living proof that even the most divided histories could find common ground, one petal at a time. The garden's architecture speaks in a language of stone and shadow, where every archway and alcove holds a secret dialogue between past and present. Take the Moon Gate, for instance, a perfect circle of weathered sandstone that once formed part of an Ottoman officer's tent foundation. Repurposed as an entrance to the Rose Garden, its curve now frames not military strategists, but bridal parties and painters capturing the play of light through its ancient geometry. Nearby, the remnants of a collapsed fortress wall were transformed into the Whispering Gallery, where visitors pressing their ears to certain stones can hear faint echoes, a quirk of acoustics that turns medieval masonry into an accidental sound sculpture. Then there's the water bastion, perhaps the most ingenious reinvention of all. What was once a defensive strongpoint bristling with archers now cascades with waterfalls, its arrow slits converted into niches for trailing vines. The structure's original murder holds those grim openings through which defenders poured boiling oil, now drip nothing more threatening than ivy tendrils, while the walkway where sentries paced their anxious vigils has become a trellis for grapevines, heavy with fruit by late summer. Even the iron rings used to tether siege engines now support hanging baskets that sway like pendulum weights measuring peace instead of war. The garden's pavilions take this philosophy further, blending architectural DNA from both worlds. The Dawn Pavilion, with its Ottoman-style domed roof and European stained glass, catches the morning light in a kaleidoscope that paints the surrounding flower beds in shifting hues. Its columns are carved with intertwining motifs, Austrian oak leaves embracing Turkish tulips, a stone tapestry of reconciliation. Meanwhile, the Twilight Pavilion takes a more playful approach. Its lattice screens cast shadows that replicate the patterns of long-gone military banners when the sun sits just right, a fleeting ghost of heraldry that dissolves into abstract art as the angle shifts. For visitors, these structures aren't just beautiful backdrops, they're immersive history lessons. Children clamber over converted catapult bases that now serve as stepping stones across koi ponds, their hands tracing grooves once meant for ropes now cradling moss. Couples share secrets in the Archer's Nook, a semicircular bench built into what was once an arrow stockpile, its walls still faintly scored by whetstones sharpening projectile points. Even the garden's modern amenities whisper of adaptation. The cafe occupies a restored grain storehouse where Ottoman engineers once calculated ration supplies, its original chalk markings still visible beneath glass floor panels. What makes these architectural hybrids so extraordinary isn't just their craftsmanship, but their refusal to choose between memory and utility. A staircase in the Sentinel Tower follows the exact spiral where defenders once raced to their posts, but now leads to a panoramic viewing platform where tourists photograph sunsets rather than approaching armies. The timber beams in the Linden Hall still show axe marks from their hasty construction during the siege, yet they now support a ceiling painted with constellations from both European and Ottoman star charts. Everywhere you look, the buildings perform this delicate dance, honoring their original intent while embracing radically new meanings. Perhaps the most poignant example is the smallest, the Lantern Arch, a humble passageway connecting two garden sections. Its keystone is a salvaged cannonball suspended in a net of wrought iron vines. By day, it's merely decorative, but as dusk falls, Caretakers light oil lamps clip to the ironwork, their glow reflecting off the metal sphere until it seems to hover like a miniature sun. It's a wink to the past, acknowledging the projectile's destructive potential while transforming it into a source of warmth and illumination. In this garden, even ammunition becomes art, and every architectural gesture whispers the same truth. What was built for division can, with enough imagination, become a bridge. Water became the garden's most eloquent poet, transforming scars into verses of serenity. Where soldiers once dug trenches to breach Vienna's defenses, crystal-clear streams now meander, their gentle murmurs drowning out echoes of battle. The designers understood water's dual power. It could erase and renew, its fluidity a living metaphor for change. At the heart of the garden, the Sultan Spring pulses quietly, fed by the same underground source Ottoman engineers tapped during the siege. Back then, it was a strategic asset. Today, its waters arc gracefully over a mosaic of salvaged ceramic tiles, their blue and white patterns a fusion of Ottoman and Habsburg motifs. Visitors trailing fingers through the spray seldom realize their touching history rewritten. The fountains are masterclasses in symbolic alchemy. The Tears Fountain, for instance, repurposes a crater left by an exploding powder keg. Bronze droplets cast from melted cannonballs drip endlessly into a basin carved from a single block of limestone that once shielded musketeers. It's a paradox: the harder the materials, the softer the effect. Sunlight fractures through the falling water, painting rainbows on nearby ivy, as if the garden itself insists on layering joy over grief. Nearby, the dialogue pool takes this further. Two mirror still bodies of water connected by a narrow channel, representing the tentative first exchanges between former enemies. Lily pads float like green peace treaties, their roots tangled beneath the surface where divisions blur. For all its artistry, the water's true genius lies in acoustics. The designers weaponized sound against memory, replacing the cacophony of war with nature's playlist. The brook of whispers threads through willow groves, its flow engineered to mimic hushed conversation. Sit beside it at dusk, and you'll swear the water speaks in half-heard words, a liquid chorus soothing the land's unseen wounds. Even the rain here feels intentional. Collected in cisterns disguised as ornamental urns, it's released during dry spells through hidden channels, ensuring the garden never falls silent. Therapeutic by design, these water features pioneered what we now call restorative landscapes. Patients from Vienna's earliest hospitals were brought here to sit by the moon reflection pond, where the water's surface, disturbed by precisely placed stepping stones, created ever-changing patterns said to calm fevered minds. Modern studies would later confirm what Lucas intuited. The sound of moving water lowers cortisol levels, its rhythmic constancy a balm for frayed nerves. It's no accident that the noisiest battles once raged where the gentlest waterfalls now cascade, as if the land itself sought equilibrium. What makes these aquatic elements extraordinary isn't just their beauty, but their quiet rebellion. Every bubbling fountain is a victory over thirst during siege. Every koi pond a subversion of moats designed to drown attackers. Children now skip stones across ponds that once reflected burning towers, their laughter rising like steam from water warmed by the same sun that witnessed the smoke of retreat. In this garden, water doesn't just flow, it forgives, carrying away the past one shimmering droplet at a time while nurturing the roots of what grows in its place. The garden never sleeps, it simply changes costumes with the turning of the earth. Spring arrives with a fanfare of tulips, their petals unfurling like miniature flags declaring winter's surrender. These are no ordinary blooms, they're descendants of those first Ottoman bulbs, their colors deepening over centuries of careful cultivation. Between them, crocuses push through frost-softened soil in explosions of purple and gold, mimicking the mosaic patterns of distant Istanbul mosques. This seasonal alchemy wasn't left to chance. Lucas and Kemmel designed their planting schemes like composers orchestrating a symphony, ensuring each plant's solo moment would harmonize with the next. Early blooming snowdrops give way to daffodils, which fade just as the peonies take center stage, a relay race of color where the baton is always passed seamlessly. Come summer, the garden becomes a living kaleidoscope. The Persian silk tree showers pink confetti onto pathways below, while climbing roses transform siege tower remnants into fragrant pyramids. Bees crisscross between European lavender and Ottoman sage, their pollination routes tracing invisible trade agreements between former enemies. Even the heat plays its part. The white marble of repurposed cannon platforms reflects sunlight, creating microclimates where delicate cyclamens thrive. Visitors following the winding paths in July might stumble upon the moon gate draped in midnight blue clematis, its blossoms so dense they seem to drip from the stone like frozen starlight. This is the garden at its most exuberant, a celebration of survival where every petal seems to shout, "Look what we've built from what was broken," autumn brings a more contemplative magic. The linden trees Lucas planted along the old defensive perimeter turn into torches of gold, their leaves swirling into the trenches below like fallen battle standards. Ottoman fig trees drop their fruit with soft thuds, the jammy scent mingling with the sharp perfume of Austrian crabapples. Here, the designer's foresight shines brightest. The fiery foliage of Turkish hazels echoes the orange tones of European maples, creating a visual dialogue across the garden. Even the water features join the chorus, with floating leaves transforming the reflecting pools into impressionist paintings. It's as if the land itself is exhaling after summer's intensity, trading vibrancy for depth. Winter strips the garden to its bones, revealing the hidden poetry of its structure. Snow dusts the cannonball pavilion's ironwork like powdered sugar on a blacksmith's confection, while the frozen surfaces of the dialogue pool become canvases for Frost's delicate etchings. This is when the evergreens, those steadfast soldiers of the plant world, earn their keep. Austrian pines stand sentinel beside Ottoman boxwoods, their greenery a defiant reminder that life persists even in stillness. The season's quiet unveils secrets, the way morning light slants through the bare branches of the sentinel tower, casting shadow patterns that replicate long-lost fortifications on the snow. Visitors who brave the cold discover a different kind of beauty, one that speaks in whispers rather than shouts, where the garden's skeleton tells stories its summer foliage conceals. What seems like nature's whim is actually meticulous choreography. The designers buried bulbs at staggered depths to ensure sequential blooming, while deciduous trees were positioned to frame winter vistas like living picture frames. Even the textures were planned: crunchy autumn leaves left undisturbed to mulch the soil, spring's first shoots pushing through them as if the garden were literally rising from its own decay. This cyclical rebirth wasn't just horticultural brilliance, it was a philosophical statement. By ensuring something thrived in every season, Lucas and his team created a living metaphor that no matter how harsh the winter, how violent the storm, the earth remembers how to heal. The garden doesn't merely endure the seasons, it converses with them, each transformation a new verse in an endless poem written in petals and frost. The garden's transformation didn't stop at plants and pathways. It became a bustling sanctuary for creatures great and small, each finding refuge in this accidental Eden. High in the hollows of repurposed watchtowers, barn owls nest where archers once stood sentry, their haunting calls replacing the twang of bowstrings. These silent hunters thrive on the garden's bounty of voles and insects, their presence a poetic twist of fate. What once defended against invaders now shelters life instead of taking it. Even the tower's arrow slits serve a new purpose, their narrow openings creating ideal drafts for swifts to navigate as they dart in and out, stitching the sky with their aerobatics. Beneath the surface, the old siege moats, once grim barriers against attackers, teem with aquatic life. Carp glide through sun-dappled waters, their scales flashing like discarded coins among water lilies whose roots purify what was once stagnant and foul. Dragonflies patrol these liquid corridors, their iridescent wings mirroring the stained glass of nearby pavilions. Local fishers whisper that the largest carp bear faint markings resembling Ottoman calligraphy, a fanciful tale born from the garden's alchemy of history and myth. The garden's mosaic of microhabitats supports surprises at every turn. Hedgehogs curl into balls beneath rosemary bushes planted from Ottoman medicinal gardens, their spiky defenses softer than the iron spikes that once studded the walls. Butterflies, including the rare Apollo, thought extinct in the region after the siege fires, flutter between eastern poppies and western cornflowers, their wings mapping a pollination route that ignores human borders. Even the stonework plays host to life, Emerald green lizards bask on sun-warmed cannonball fragments, their quick tongues catching flies while kestrels circle overhead like living weather vanes. This biodiversity wasn't accidental. The designers understood that wildlife would be their ultimate collaborators. They left dead trees standing as woodpecker condos, piled siege rubble into drystone walls for weasels, and planted berry-laden shrubs to feed migrating thrushes. The garden's water features include shallow edges where herons can stalk frogs, while bat boxes hidden in the linden hall's eaves ensure night-shift pest control. Every creature, from the tiniest leafcutter bee to the red foxes that trot along moonlit paths, became part of the garden's living tapestry. Perhaps most remarkably, the garden has become a crossroads for migratory species. Storks pause here on their journey between Africa and Eastern Europe, their nests atop the water bastion a far cry from its original function. Birdwatchers tally over 100 species annually, from Ottoman subspecies of warblers to Habsburg-era blackbirds with distinct local dialects. The garden's blend of shelter, food, and water creates an oasis in the urban landscape, a place where nature writes its own peace treaty across generations of wings and paws. This thriving ecosystem offers an unspoken lesson. When humans step back, even slightly, life rushes in to fill the gaps. The garden's walls may have been built to exclude, but their cracks now welcome mason bees and ferns. Trenches designed to hinder cavalry nourish frogs that serenade the dusk. In this way, the creatures of the garden perform their own quiet restoration, proving that sometimes the most profound healing comes not from grand designs, but from simply allowing the world to reclaim what was always hers. Over generations, the garden didn't just grow plants, it cultivated an entire cultural identity for the city around it. What began as a symbol of defiance slowly wove itself into the daily rhythms of Viennese life, transforming from a curiosity into a cherished heartbeat of the community. Locals didn't merely visit the garden, they adopted it as a living heirloom, a shared storybook where every season added new chapters. Annual festivals sprouted like wildflowers around its cycles, the tulip unveiling in spring, when children dressed as Ottoman gardeners and Habsburg nobles reenacted the first planting with paper flowers, the fountain moon ceremony in summer, where floating lanterns traced the paths of old siege trenches, their glow softening the edges of history. Even the harvest took on new meaning, with farmers donating the first figs and apples to street feasts, their sweetness a tribute to the garden's lessons in abundance. Artists, too, found endless inspiration in this landscape of reconciliation. 18th-century composers wrote symphonies mimicking the garden's soundscape, the plink of water droplets on brass leaves, the rustle of wind through silk trees, while painters captured the way dawn light gilded the Cannonball Pavilion, turning iron into gold. A lesser-known but poignant tradition emerged among local potters, who began embedding fragments of siege-era ceramics into their work, creating dishes where Ottoman floral patterns entwined with Alpine motifs. These weren't just decorative choices, they were acts of quiet revolution, using beauty to rewrite narratives of conflict. The garden's influence seeped into unexpected corners of daily life. Cafes along the adjacent streets started serving peace cakes, layered pastries alternating Austrian poppy seed with Ottoman pistachio paste. Tour guides developed a habit of pointing not to surviving battle scars in the city walls, but to the climbing roses that now veined their cracks. Even the local dialect absorbed the garden's legacy. Phrases like "growing through the stones" entered common parlance, shorthand for resilience in hard times. Perhaps most strikingly, the space became a neutral ground where divided communities could meet. During tense political eras, protesters from opposing factions would deliberately hold rallies along the garden's dialogue pool, the water's calming presence tempering clashes. Immigrant groups from the Balkans and Middle Europe found solace in its familiar plants, while school teachers brought students to sketch its blending of architectural styles, turning botany into a gentle lesson in coexistence. The garden's caretakers, many descended from Kemmel's original team, became cultural ambassadors in their own right, their pruning shears as diplomatic as any statesman's pen. Nowhere is this impact more visible than in the Silent Parade, a tradition begun after a devastating flood in 1782. As waters receded, revealing the garden miraculously intact, its drainage systems designed by Ottoman engineers had held. Citizens marched through its paths not with cheers but with seedlings. Each person planted something where the flood's damage was worst, a wordless testament to their belief in renewal. That ritual repeats every 50 years, the most recent in 2022, when descendants of siege survivors and refugees from modern conflicts knelt side by side to bury bulbs along the Whispering Gallery. The garden's true power lies not in its petals or pavilions, but in how it taught a city to see itself differently. Where once Vienna defined itself by what it had resisted, the garden offered a prouder narrative of what it had embraced and transformed. Streets once named for generals now bear the titles of plants introduced here, while the city's coat of arms discreetly incorporates the silhouette of the Moon Gate. Visitors often remark how even in winter, when the garden sleeps under snow, you can feel its presence in the way locals walk, a little slower, with eyes that still search for beauty in broken places. That may be its greatest legacy, not just a space but a way of seeing. Word of the garden's magic spread slowly at first, carried by the ink-stained pages of botanists' journals and the sketchbooks of traveling artists. Then, in 1791, something unexpected happened. The famed naturalist Alexander von Humboldt detoured from his South American expedition to visit Vienna, where he stood transfixed before the Moon Gate at sunset. His subsequent letters to European royalty called the garden a living atlas of reconciliation, sparking a pilgrimage of scientists and poets alike. By the time Beethoven composed his Pastoral Symphony, rumored to be inspired by the garden's dawn chorus, the site had become a fixture on the Grand Tour, its winding paths worn smooth by the boots of aristocrats and the clogs of flower farmers alike. The garden's global reputation crystallized in 1867, when Empress Elizabeth hosted Japan's first diplomatic delegation beneath its Persian silk trees. The envoys, struck by how seamlessly Eastern and Western horticulture intertwined here, gifted the garden with cherry saplings that still bloom in delicate pink protest against Vienna's springs. This cross-continental exchange set a precedent. Over the next century, every visiting dignitary from Teddy Roosevelt to Queen Rania would leave behind a plant from their homeland. Today, the garden's diplomacy beds form a living United Nations where Rwandan orchids nod greetings to Norwegian lupines. Recognition came in waves. The garden earned UNESCO World Heritage status in 1985, not just for its beauty, but as a landscape of cultural dialogue. Photography bans in the early 20th century, meant to protect fragile ecosystems, only heightened its allure, turning postcards of its tulip mosaics into black market treasures. By 2000, visitor numbers surpassed 1 million annually, with queues stretching past the old city walls, a far cry from Lucas's era, when caretakers bribed locals with fig jam to attend planting festivals. Yet fame brought complex challenges. The very footfalls that fund preservation also compact the soil where rare snowdrops struggle. Summer crowds drown out the Whispering Gallery's subtle echoes, while selfie sticks threaten century-old espaliered pears. In response, the garden pioneered ingenious solutions: timed ticketing to spread visits, biodegradable walkways that mimic Ottoman carpet patterns, and silent hours where speakers pipe in recordings of the garden's 1920s bird populations. The most radical experiment, training jackdaws, the garden's resident mischief makers, to steal dropped coins and deposit them in donation boxes, turning avian thievery into conservation funding. What makes this place endure isn't just its petals or pavilions, but its evolving conscience. When climate change altered bloom cycles, gardeners responded by creating microhabitats mimicking the plant's native regions, shaded alcoves for Anatolian species, windbreaks for alpine flowers. During the refugee crisis of 2015, they partnered with Syrian botanists to cultivate endangered Middle Eastern plants, weaving new narratives into the garden's living tapestry. Even its gift shop subverts expectations, selling seeds from enemy lines, Austrian apple cuttings grafted onto Ottoman rootstock. The garden's truest legacy lies in what it refuses to become. Despite every guidebook calling it a time capsule, it steadfastly evolves, its caretakers quietly replanting sections to reflect contemporary dialogues. Recent additions include a memory grove where visitors tie ribbons to honor personal losses, and a guerrilla artist installed beehive shaped like a siege cannon, its honeycombs producing gold-tinged honey from flowers growing on old battlements. This delicate balance, honoring history while embracing change, turns every visit into a participation. You don't just witness the garden's story, you become part of its next chapter, your footsteps joining centuries of pilgrims who came not just to see beauty, but to learn how it grows from broken ground. Preserving this living masterpiece requires a delicate dance between honoring its past and safeguarding its future. The garden's caretakers face a unique challenge: how to maintain plants that have thrived for centuries while protecting fragile historical features like the cannonball pavilions, rusted ironwork, or the whispering gallery's echo-prone stones. Their solution is a blend of ancient wisdom and cutting-edge science. Ottoman irrigation techniques, passed down through generations of gardeners, now work in tandem with soil moisture sensors that alert staff via smartphone when the tulip beds need water. The same trenches once dug to breach Vienna's walls are now monitored by 3D scanners that detect subtle shifts in the earth, preventing collapses before they happen. Funding this labor of love comes from surprising sources. While government grants cover basic maintenance, the garden's most innovative projects often rely on Adopt a Bulb programs where donors sponsor individual flowers, receiving bloom time photos with historical context about their origins. Local breweries produce a special ale using herbs from the garden's medicinal beds, with profits funding student arborists. Even the compost system tells a story: vegetable waste from nearby restaurants joins fallen leaves in piles warmed by geothermal coils salvaged from the old siege tunnels, creating soil rich enough to grow the garden's next generation of Ottoman roses. Volunteers form the garden's lifeblood, their roles as diverse as the ecosystem they tend. Retired engineers maintain the water features using Kemmel's original schematics, while textile artists repair protective willow fences with traditional weaving patterns. Every autumn, school children participate in the Seed Guardians program, harvesting next year's blooms while hearing stories of how each plant survived the siege. The most poignant contributions come from descendants of both Ottoman soldiers and Viennese defenders, who gather each spring to prune the reconciliation hedge, a living wall where Austrian hawthorn and Turkish hazel branches are deliberately intertwined. Climate change has forced the garden to adapt in unexpected ways. Rising temperatures prompted the creation of shaded, microclimate pockets, using repurposed seed shields as sun filters, while drought-resistant species from the Ottoman homeland are being crossbred with local varieties. The garden's archivists play a crucial role here, scouring Lucas's original notebooks for clues about how certain plants weathered past extremes. Their findings inform not just preservation efforts, but global research into historical horticulture's resilience lessons. The garden's conservation philosophy extends beyond physical care. Oral history projects capture the memories of longtime visitors, ensuring that intangible heritage like the exact pitch of the Dawn Pavilion's wind chimes or the secret to perfecting fig jam from the siege-era trees isn't lost. Nighttime soundscape preservation sessions record the garden's auditory fingerprint, from owl calls to the particular splash of the tears fountain. Even the resident jackdaws contribute, their nest-building habits studied for clues about which historical materials withstand time best. What makes these efforts extraordinary is their refusal to freeze the garden in amber. When a storm toppled one of the original lindens in 2019, its wood was carved into bench slats inscribed with verses from both German and Ottoman poets. New plantings follow the founder's spirit rather than strict historical accuracy. Recent additions include a bed of Syrian olives grown from cuttings donated by refugees, their silvery leaves shimmering beside 16th-century rose varieties. The message is clear: this garden lives not as a museum, but as an ongoing conversation between past and present, its caretakers tending not just to plants and stones, but to the delicate alchemy that transforms shared history into shared future. Even the most harmonious gardens face storms, and Vienna's living masterpiece is no exception. Behind its blossoms and tranquil pathways, heated debates simmer about how to balance preservation with progress. Some argue the garden has become a victim of its own success: overcrowded footpaths eroding delicate root systems, selfie sticks snapping fragile blooms, and the constant hum of tour guides drowning out the whispering gallery's ancient echoes. Preservationists rally behind ironclad rules: no new structures, no amplified sound, and strict limits on daily visitors. Yet others counter that freezing the garden in time betrays its very spirit. After all, they remind us, this was never meant to be a museum. It's always been a conversation between past and present. The most passionate clashes erupt over technology. Traditionalists bristle at proposals for augmented reality, displays that would overlay historical siege maps onto visitors' smartphones, calling it a desecration of the garden's tangible magic. Meanwhile, innovators point to the Moon Gate's original builders, Ottoman engineers who used the latest hydrological science of their era. Would Lucas and Kemal, they ask, have rejected modern tools that might deepen visitors' connection to the garden's layered history? Even the jackdaws have become pawns in this debate. Some want to tag them with tiny trackers to study their seed-spreading habits, while others see this as turning wild collaborators into laboratory subjects. Commercial pressures add another layer of tension. Nearby businesses push for extended evening hours to capitalize on dinner crowds, dreaming of candlelit concerts among the tulips. Conservationists warn that artificial lighting could disrupt centuries-old pollination rhythms, citing studies showing how moths, the garden's night-shift pollinators, are already avoiding areas near the cafe's lanterns. The compromise: solar-powered pathway markers that glow just bright enough to prevent stumbles but dim before midnight, a delicate dance between safety and ecology. Perhaps the thorniest issue revolves around whose stories get told. Recent petitions demand plaques acknowledging the Ottoman gardeners' contributions alongside Lucas's, correcting decades of Eurocentric narratives. Others resist, arguing the garden's power lies in its wordless lessons. The Caretakers' solution has been characteristically subtle. New signage uses QR codes linking to oral histories from multiple perspectives, letting visitors choose how deep to dig. It's a digital age twist on the garden's oldest tradition, offering different paths to understanding. Through all these debates, one truth remains rooted: the garden's greatest strength is its adaptability. When protesters object to pruning heritage roses, gardeners demonstrate how strategic cuts mimic natural grazing patterns from when deer roamed freely. When climate activists demand drought-resistant landscaping, the team unveils plans drawn from 16th century Ottoman dry gardening techniques. Even the much-maligned crowds are being redirected through clever design. New looping paths follow the original siege trench patterns, naturally dispersing foot traffic while honoring historical contours. What emerges from these conflicts isn't discord, but something far more remarkable: a living model for how societies might navigate other polarized debates. The garden teaches that preservation needn't mean stagnation, nor progress mean erasure. Its ongoing evolution proves that with enough creativity, even opposing viewpoints can be grafted together, yielding surprising hybrid solutions. As dawn breaks over another day of quiet compromise, where a drone monitoring soil health shares the sky with the descendants of Kemmel's songbirds, the garden whispers its timeless lesson: the deepest roots are flexible enough to bend, strong enough to hold. Beneath the garden's postcard-perfect surface lies a labyrinth of secrets waiting to be uncovered. Few visitors notice the faint carvings on the moon gate's underside, Ottoman numerals marking lunar phases, a hidden calendar used by gardeners to time plantings after the siege. Run your fingers along the Whispering Gallery's western wall, and you'll feel subtle grooves spelling out names in Arabic calligraphy, likely etched by bored soldiers during lulls in battle. These aren't mere scratches, they're frozen whispers of lives interrupted, now softened by centuries of moss. The garden's most enchanting secret hides in plain sight: the lover's compass, a circular pattern in the cobblestones near the dialogue pool. Stand at its center during a summer solstice sunset, and the light aligns perfectly through 4 archways, each framing a different vista, symbolizing the Ottoman belief that true harmony requires perspective from all directions. Local legend says couples who kiss here at this golden hour inherit the garden's resilience, their love meant to weather storms as these walls have. Then there are the ghost stories, not of specters but of scents. On certain humid evenings, the air near the old siege kitchen site carries phantom whiffs of saffron and burnt honey, as if the past refuses to fully fade. Botanists attribute this to rare soil bacteria activated by moisture, but romantics insist it's the aroma of Ottoman field rations still lingering in the earth. Similarly mysterious are the night tulips, dark purple blooms that only unfurl after dusk, their petals vibrating gently in the breeze like murmuring lips. Kemmel's journals reveal these were originally planted to guide nighttime patrols. Now they serve as living lanterns for moonlit strollers. For those who know where to look, the garden offers coded messages from its creators. The seemingly random arrangement of cannonballs around the Tears fountain actually mirrors the constellation Orion as it appeared on the night the siege was broken, a celestial memorial hidden in plain sight. Even the resident jackdaws play their part in this legacy of secrets. Observant visitors might spot them deliberately dropping shiny objects into the Sultan's spring, recreating an Ottoman ritual for good fortune. Perhaps the most poignant hidden detail lies beneath the Sentinel Tower's staircase. A single stone step bears 2 faint footprints, one from a child's boot, the other from a sandal pressed into the mortar during construction. Archivists believe this marks where Lucas's young daughter and Kemmel's apprentice stood side by side, testing the drying plaster as their elders worked. It's an accidental monument to innocence persisting amid history's weight, waiting 5 centuries for someone to kneel and notice. These aren't just quirks, they're the garden's quiet rebellion against being reduced to a pretty backdrop. Every hidden inscription, every ghostly fragrance whispers the same truth, that beneath the surface beauty lies a deeper, wilder story, one that rewards those willing to look beyond the petals. Vienna's Garden of Reconciliation was never alone in its vision. It sparked a quiet revolution across continents, inspiring spaces where history and horticulture intertwine to heal. Just outside Berlin, the nature park Schöneberger Suedland transforms a derelict rail yard into a wilderness where rusted locomotives vanish beneath ivy, their steel skeletons now trellises for climbing roses. Like the Viennese garden, this park doesn't hide its industrial scars. It celebrates them, allowing nature to rewrite the narrative of a once divided city. Parallels are striking. Both places use water as a unifying element, with Berlin's rain basins reflecting the sky much like Vienna's repurposed siege trenches. Meanwhile, in Sarajevo, the wartime scars of the 1990s siege birthed an unexpected tribute: the War Childhood Museum's courtyard garden. Bullet-pocked walls frame raised beds where local children cultivate flowers from seeds donated by cities that also endured sieges: Leningrad, Beirut, Jerusalem. The garden's layout deliberately mirrors Vienna's dialogue pool, with a central water feature fed by shell fragments melted into art. What makes Sarajevo's version unique is its living archive, each plant tagged with QR codes linking to oral histories, blending botany with testimony in a way that would have made Lucas and Kemmel nod in recognition. Japan offers a different but equally profound approach at the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park. Where Vienna's garden grew from military failure, Hiroshima's emerged from unimaginable loss, its design centered around a single surviving ginkgo tree that withstood the atomic blast. The tree's descendants now grow in botanical gardens worldwide, including Vienna's own diplomacy beds, creating an unbroken chain of resilience. Hiroshima's approach to water features echoes the tears fountain too. Its memorial cenotaph frames the atomic dome's reflection in still waters, turning horror into something contemplative and strangely beautiful. Not all transformations are so solemn. In New York, the High Line reimagined an abandoned elevated railway as a floating meadow where wildflowers spill between original train tracks. While less overtly historical than Vienna's garden, it shares the same DNA of adaptive reuse: industrial grit softened by native grasses, rusted railings repurposed as art installations. The High Line even borrowed Vienna's trick of seasonal storytelling, with plantings that changed to echo the area's immigrant history. Tulip varieties from Dutch settlers in spring, tobacco plants recalling the Lenape people in summer. What sets Vienna's garden apart isn't just its age, but its intentional dialogue between former enemies. Most reclaimed spaces focus on environmental renewal or artistic expression. Vienna insisted on historical reconciliation as the root of its design. When Seoul converted the overpasses of its demolished highway into the Seaulo 7017 Sky Garden, the emphasis was urban greening, not reckoning with the Korean War's divisions. Similarly, Paris's Promenade Plantée, while breathtaking, avoids addressing the revolutions and sieges embedded in its stones. Vienna's garden remains rare in its courage to let opposing histories share the same soil without dilution, a lesson that continues to challenge newer projects. Yet the influence is undeniable. In Belfast, the peace walls that once divided neighborhoods now feature peephole gardens, where flowers and murals visible through small openings hint at connection without forcing it. Lisbon's Estufa Fria greenhouse complex incorporates fragments from demolished colonial-era buildings into its fern displays, acknowledging uncomfortable pasts while fostering new growth. Even Dubai's Miracle Garden, for all its flashy excess, includes a memorial section where flowers spell out peace treaties in Arabic and Hebrew, a direct nod to Vienna's bilingual plaques. The true measure of Vienna's legacy lies in how these gardens talk to one another. Saplings from Hiroshima's ginkgo grow in Sarajevo. Belfast's peace flowers bloom in Berlin. Each space becomes both student and teacher, adapting Vienna's core idea that landscapes can be mediators to local wounds. What unites them all is a shared understanding. Beauty doesn't erase history, but it can soften its edges, creating spaces where the past remains visible yet no longer cut so deep. The world may have many gardens, but few dare to cultivate hope so deliberately from what was meant to divide. The garden has long been a muse for artists who find in its winding paths and whispering leaves a canvas as dynamic as time itself. Early 19th century painters were among the first to immortalize its magic, with watercolorists like Ferdinand Georg Waldmüller capturing the way dawn light gilded the Cannonball Pavilion's ironwork, transforming rust into gold. These works weren't mere landscapes, they were love letters to resilience, each brushstroke echoing the garden's quiet defiance of its violent origins. But it was the Impressionists who truly grasped its spirit, their dappled strokes mimicking the play of sunlight through the Linden Hall's stained glass, where colors bleed and blend like history itself. Photographers faced a different challenge: how to freeze a place that thrives on change. The pioneering botanist Anna Atkins, known for her cyanotypes of algae, turned her lens to the garden's tulip mosaics in the 1860s, her blue and white prints revealing the geometric precision hidden beneath the bloom's apparent wildness. Decades later, war photographer Ernst Haas shifted from documenting conflict to capturing the garden's seasonal transformations. His color-saturated images of autumn maples reflected in the dialogue pool becoming synonymous with post-war hope. Even the garden's caretakers joined the tradition. Hidden in the archives are thousands of glass plate negatives shot by groundskeeper Franz Leitner between 1890 and 1910, each frame tracking how saplings planted by Ottoman gardeners grew to shade the very walls their ancestors once besieged. Writers, too, have woven the garden into literature's tapestry. Rainer Maria Rilke penned verses comparing its night tulips to silk lanterns lighting the way for ghosts, while Orhan Pamuk set a pivotal scene in the Museum of Innocence beneath its Persian silk trees, their pink blossoms mirroring his character's tangled emotions. The garden's most unexpected chronicler, though, was a 17th-century Ottoman diarist named Leyla Hanım, whose recently rediscovered journals describe the scent of Damascus roses mingling with Austrian linden blossoms as Allah's own perfume, proof that Earth remembers what men forget. What makes these artistic interpretations so powerful isn't just their technical skill, but their ability to reveal hidden dialogues. A contemporary photographer might focus on the way jackdaws nest in the moon gate's crevices, their wings echoing the arch's curve, a visual rhyme between nature and architecture. A poet could spend hours tracing how the whispering gallery's echoes distort words, turning ordinary speech into something haunting and new. Even the garden's silence inspires. Composer Georgi Ligeti's Garden Whispers for String Quartet recreates the rustle of wind through the espaliered pears, each note a leaf trembling on the brink of falling. The garden's true artistic legacy, however, lies in how it reshapes creators themselves. Visit on any given morning, and you'll find sketch artists leaning close to capture the fractal patterns of frost on cannonball fragments, or novelists scribbling in notebooks beneath the Sentinel Tower, where the shadows of past and present overlap. Some of the most striking tributes aren't professional works at all. They're the amateur watercolors left by visitors in the garden's guestbooks, where a child's wobbly rendering of the Tears Fountain hangs beside a refugee's ink painting of the Reconciliation Hedge. These raw, unpolished pieces capture something essential: that the garden's beauty isn't passive but participatory, inviting everyone who walks its paths to become both witness and co-creator of its endless unfolding story. The power of this garden lies not just in its petals and pathways, but in the quiet moments of connection it fosters, those split seconds when a visitor's breath catches, when a hand unconsciously reaches to touch weathered stone, when tears mingle with dew on the leaves. Take Marta, a retired teacher from Warsaw who first came here on a whim during the darkest year of her life after losing her husband. She remembers sitting by the tears fountain, watching sunlight fracture through the droplets when something shifted. It wasn't just the beauty, she says. It was realizing that this water fell on soldiers from both sides centuries ago, just as my tears fell for someone I loved. The garden didn't erase my grief, it made it part of something larger. Now she returns every spring, leaving handwritten poems tucked between the tulip bulbs, her words joining the layers of stories embedded in the soil. Then there's Ali, a Syrian refugee who arrived in Vienna with nothing but the clothes he wore. One frozen February morning, he stumbled upon the garden's winter bones, the stark beauty of frosted branches and the stubborn green of Ottoman boxwoods pushing through snow. Back home, my father grew roses our family had tended for generations, he recalls. When I saw those Anatolian snowdrops blooming where cannons once roared, it felt like a message. You too can put down roots here. Today, Ollie volunteers as a gardener, teaching visitors how to say hope in Arabic while pruning the very plants his ancestors might have cultivated. For some, the garden becomes a living scrapbook of milestones. Elena and Jonas had their first date on a bench near the Whispering Gallery, where nervous laughter turned to shared wonder at the acoustic's magic. They returned 5 years later, their infant daughter bundled between them, to press her tiny feet into clay beneath the Sentinel Tower, a private ritual echoing the ancient footprints hidden under the staircase. This place reminds us that love isn't about avoiding cracks, Elena says. It's about seeing how light pours through them. The most unexpected testimonies come from those who expected indifference. A group of battle reenactors, dressed in full Habsburg and Ottoman regalia for a historical event, fell silent when they reached the reconciliation hedge. We'd spent years acting enemies, admits their leader Karl. Then we saw those intertwined branches, hawthorn and hazel, growing as one, and realized we'd been telling the story backward all along. Now their performances include scenes of soldiers trading seeds instead of blows, a small but seismic shift inspired by the garden's quiet teaching. Perhaps no story captures the garden's alchemy better than Hiroko's. Visiting from Hiroshima, she brought a single paper crane to leave at the Moon Gate, only to find it already adorned with dozens from previous pilgrims. As she added hers to the chain, an elderly Viennese woman, a child during World War II, offered help tying the string. Neither spoke the other's language, but their hands collaborated effortlessly, folding the crane's wings just so. Later, Hiroko would describe it as an origami of the heart, where centuries of suspicion crumpled into something delicate yet unbreakable. These moments accumulate like petals on a pond, ripples of connection spreading far beyond their origins. A teenager sketches the Cannonball Pavilion for an art project and discovers her Turkish classmate's grandfather once tended those roses. A grieving widower whispers secrets to the jackdaws, convinced they carry messages to his wife in their clattering flight. Even skeptics arrive rolling their eyes at another tourist trap, only to find themselves hours later, shoes off, toes in the dialogue pool's cool water, marveling at how light refracts differently through each ripple. The garden never claims to heal all wounds or solve all divides, but in a world that often shouts, it offers something radical, a space where listening to rustling leaves, to distant echoes, to the quiet pulse of your own heart becomes second nature. Visitors may arrive carrying burdens, but they leave having added something invisible yet indelible to the garden's tapestry. their laughter caught in the ivy, their tears seasoning the soil, their stories braiding into the roots of what grows next. The garden doesn't just bloom with flowers, it blossoms with lessons, turning every pathway into an open-air classroom where history, botany, and ecology intertwine. School children clutching sketchbooks follow guides dressed as 16th-century gardeners, tracing the journey of a single tulip bulb from Ottoman battlefields to Viennese soil. These aren't dry lectures, they're immersive adventures where kids press their ears to the whispering gallery stones, gasping as the walls murmur stories of siege engineers and rose cultivators. Teachers rave about the Time Traveler's Toolkit program, where students handle replica artifacts, a rusted cannonball beside a porcelain seed jar, sparking debates about how objects of destruction and creation can share the same history. For older students, the garden becomes a laboratory. Biology classes measure microclimates around the cannonball pavilion, discovering how its iron retains heat to shelter tender Anatolian snowdrops. History students reenact diplomatic negotiations under the Linden Hall's painted constellations, role-playing Habsburg and Ottoman delegates trading not territory, but grafting techniques for fruit trees. The most popular workshop, Seeds of Peace, where participants plant hybrids using century-old techniques, mixing Austrian apple cuttings with Ottoman quince rootstock, while discussing how cultural exchange literally bears fruit. Beyond formal programs, the garden nurtures quieter teachings. Elderly volunteers, some descendants of siege survivors, host memory bench sessions, sharing family stories while demonstrating traditional pruning methods. Tourists expecting a quick photo op often find themselves lingering for unexpected guide tours, impromptu walks led by botanists who point out how the garden's layout mirrors Ottoman battlefield maps, or how certain flowers were strategically placed to mask the scent of gunpowder centuries ago. Even the resident jackdaws serve as feathered professors. Their nest-building habits inspire engineering workshops on adaptive reuse, with students designing birdhouses from recycled siege-era materials. The garden's genius lies in making complex themes tactile. A climate change seminar isn't held in a stuffy hall, but beside the sunken medicinal beds, where participants taste drought-resistant herbs bred from Ottoman and Alpine varieties. Architecture students sketch the moon gate's acoustics, then collaborate with musicians to compose pieces played on instruments made from reclaimed siege timber. During refugee integration initiatives, Syrian and Ukrainian teens tend plots of homeland flowers while practicing German, their hands in the soil bridging language gaps. Most revolutionary are the silent lessons days when no spoken tours are given. Visitors receive cards with historical quotes or botanical facts, then wander freely, discovering connections at their own pace. A teenager might pause where a plaque notes that the lavender border follows an old trench line, realizing how deep roots can heal shallow scars. A war veteran could sit by the tears fountain, watching droplets merge with the pool, and see his own grief reflected in the garden's unflinching yet gentle acknowledgement of loss. This outdoor classroom never closes its doors. Winter workshops track how plants prepare for cold, comparing Ottoman fig tree wrappings with Austrian snow shields. Night classes study bioluminescent fungi thriving on decaying siege-era timber, their glow a living metaphor for finding light in dark histories. Even the gift shop extends the learning, selling seed packets with dual language instructions, German and Turkish, and QR codes linking to oral histories from gardeners across centuries. What makes these programs extraordinary isn't just their content, but their philosophy. That understanding grows best when rooted in place. A child who prunes a rosebush grafted by Kemmel's descendants internalizes patience. A tourist who tastes jam made from siege-era figs comprehends resilience. The garden doesn't just teach about reconciliation, it lets visitors put their hands in its soil, becoming co-authors of its next chapter. Every planted seed, every shared story adds another layer to this living syllabus, where the past isn't memorized but met with trowels and open hearts. The garden's caretakers are weaving tomorrow's legacy into its living tapestry, with plans as bold as Luca's and Kemmel's original vision. A groundbreaking Roots of Resilience initiative will transform the northern perimeter, once a no-man's land during the siege, into a global showcase of conflict to conservation stories. Here, saplings from war zones worldwide will take root, cherry trees grafted from Hiroshima's survivor groves, olive saplings cultivated from ancient groves in Syria, even magnolias grown from seeds salvaged in Kiev's botanic gardens during bombardment. Each planting will be paired with augmented reality stations where visitors can witness these trees' journeys through time, their rings unfolding like scrolls of human endurance. Sustainability drives the next evolution. The garden's famed water features will soon harness a hidden asset, the same underground springs Ottoman engineers tapped during the siege. A revolutionary hydrological ecosystem will recycle every droplet through tiered channels, first nourishing delicate Ottoman roses, then cascading to irrigate drought-resistant alpine wildflowers, finally filtering through wetlands that cleanse runoff before it rejoins the Danube. Even the lanterns illuminating evening paths are being reinvented. Prototypes glow with bioluminescent algae cultivated in repurposed cannonball casings, their soft blue light a whisper against the darkness. New exhibits will deepen the dialogue between past and future. The Silent Seeds Vault, carved into the old siege tunnel network, will preserve heirloom varieties from vanishing cultures in climate-controlled niches, their viability secured for centuries. Above ground, a floating archive of solar-powered drones will hover near the treetops, projecting oral histories from gardeners' descendants onto leaves during breezes, turning the canopy into a living storybook. Most daring is the ephemeral pavilion, a structure built entirely from biodegradable mycelium bricks and salvaged ironwork, designed to melt back into the earth after a decade, leaving only a flower bed shaped like its footprint. The garden's educational mission is also blossoming. Partnerships with refugee organizations will train newcomers as cultural pollinators, teaching them to graft heritage plants from their homelands onto the garden's rootstock. School programs will expand into time capsule gardens, where students bury letters to future generations alongside bulbs that won't bloom for 50 years. Even the resident jackdaws are getting upgrades. Tiny, non-invasive trackers will map their seed dispersal routes, creating real-time wildlife diplomacy maps showing how birds ignore human borders. What makes these plans extraordinary isn't their scale, but their philosophy, that a garden born from failure must keep evolving to stay true to its roots. Future visitors might walk through holographic recreations of the original siege camp, then taste honey from hives placed where Ottoman field kitchens once stood. They'll touch interactive soil displays revealing how centuries of care healed artillery scarred earth, or add their own hopes to a digital wishing vine that projects multilingual dreams onto the Linden Hall's ceiling. The garden refuses to become a relic. It's a living conversation where every innovation honors the original alchemy of survival and beauty. As climate change reshapes the region, the garden adapts with quiet ingenuity. Heat-resistant Turkish pines will shade vulnerable snowdrops, while subterranean cooling channels inspired by ancient Persian qanats will protect tender roots during heat waves. The memory groves will expand to include species predicted to thrive in future climates, their labels written in both current terms and the projected lingua franca of 2100. Even the compost system is being reimagined, with experimental mycelium networks breaking down waste into soil enriched with resilience-boosting microbes. The ultimate goal, to ensure the garden remains not just a monument but a mentor. Plans for a global peace gardeners exchange will send Vienna's horticulturists to nurture green spaces in conflict zones, while bringing their counterparts to study this living archive of reconciliation. A digital root network will link sister gardens worldwide, sharing real-time data on which historical grafting techniques best withstand modern droughts. And when the 500th anniversary of the siege arrives in 2029, the celebration won't focus on victory or defeat, but on how a handful of seeds and even fewer stubborn ideals outlasted every cannonball. This forward-looking spirit stays true to the garden's original magic. It honors the past not by embalming it, but by letting it breathe through every new leaf. The same stones that once anchored siege engines now support telescopes for stargazing workshops. Children who splash in the repurposed moats today may return as elders to plant trees for climates we can't yet imagine. And somewhere in the dappled shade of the Sentinel Tower, a future Lucas or Kemmel is already dreaming up the next impossible transformation, proving that the most beautiful gardens aren't those frozen in time, but those brave enough to keep growing. Every morning before dawn, when the garden still holds its breath under a blanket of mist, a small army of hands begins its quiet work. These are the keepers of the living masterpiece, not just gardeners, but historians, healers, and storytellers in dirt-stained gloves. Meet Sophia, head botanist and descendant of the monks who first tended the Ottoman snowdrops. Her mornings start with fingertips pressed to the earth, reading moisture levels like a pulse, before whispering instructions to her team in a blend of German and Turkish terms passed down through generations. Then there's Mehmet, great-great-grandson of one of Kemmel's original apprentices, whose encyclopedic knowledge of heritage grafting techniques has saved countless siege-era roses from disease. Watch him at the reconciliation hedge, where his pruning shears move with the precision of a surgeon, each cut a negotiation between preservation and growth. The challenges they face would make lesser hands falter. Climate shifts have altered bloom cycles, forcing the team to reinvent irrigation methods using 16th century Ottoman scrolls as blueprints. Last spring, a freak hailstorm shredded the tulip mosaics, but within hours, volunteers arrived with spare bulbs saved from previous seasons, their petals carrying the DNA of flowers that survived actual cannon fire. Pest control is another battlefield. Chemical sprays are forbidden, so the gardeners enlist an unlikely militia. Jackdaws are trained to pluck invasive beetles from leaves, while hedgehogs patrol underbrush, their nightly rounds more effective than any pesticide. Even the compost is a tactical operation, with sieved trench soil blended with herbal teas to boost resilience, a recipe Sophia's grandmother cribbed from an Ottoman field manual. What fuels their devotion for apprentice Lena? It's the memory moments, like when she uncovered a rusted musket ball beneath a lavender root, its surface worn smooth as a pebble by centuries of rain. Holding that, she says, you realize you're not just pulling weeds, you're stitching time. Head groundskeeper Felix speaks of the garden's hidden language, how the Persian silk trees' leaves curl before storms, or how the whispering gallery's echoes change when humidity shifts, an organic weather station more nuanced than any app. Then there's retired librarian-turned-tour guide Margit, who swears the Dawn Pavilion's stained glass casts colors unseen on any palette when the sun hits at 7:23 a.m. On the summer solstice, a phenomenon she's tracked for 30 years, their triumphs are measured in subtleties the year the night tulips finally naturalized, their seeds carried by bats to colonize the old siege tunnels, the day a Syrian refugee recognized an Aleppo pepper plant in the medicinal beds and taught them its traditional harvesting song. Every autumn, the team gathers for the Seed Council, debating which rare varieties to risk in next year's soil. Last December, they celebrated their boldest experiment yet, crossbreeding Lucas's original lindens with drought-resistant Anatolian oaks, creating a hybrid already dubbed the peace tree for its ability to thrive in both frost and heat. But the real magic happens in unscripted instants, when Mehmet calms a homesick tourist by pressing a fig into their palm, fruit from a tree grown from cuttings carried in an Ottoman soldier's pocket. When Sofia interrupts a heated debate about pathway renovations by pointing to a jackdaw balancing a shiny button on the moon gate's curve, reminding everyone that this garden has always been shaped by whimsy as much as wisdom. These stewards understand something profound. They aren't just maintaining a landmark, they're tending a living conversation between what was, what is, and what could be, one rooted not in perfection, but in the stubborn, beautiful mess of persistence. Stand in the exact spot where Ottoman engineers once plotted Vienna's downfall, and the contrast is almost surreal. Where their siege maps showed jagged trenches and gun emplacements, your feet now tread on velvety thyme lawns that release citrusy perfume with every step. The artillery positions that once anchored cannons capable of smashing stone walls now cradle something far more subversive, banks of lavender so lush they blur the outlines of the old earthworks, as if the land itself decided to soften history's sharp edges. Aerial overlays reveal the ghostly imprint of the original siege camp beneath today's garden. Straight supply routes now meandering flower alleys, the quartermaster's storehouse transformed into a pavilion where visitors sip rosehip tea beneath ceilings painted with constellations from both Ottoman and European star charts. Zoom in closer and the metamorphoses grow even more poetic. That crumbling section of the city wall where defenders poured boiling oil, it's now the backdrop for the Moon Gate, its sandstone blocks meticulously preserved, not as a monument to violence, but as a frame for dawn light to paint shifting geometries on the gravel below. The depressions left by exploding mortar shells have become rain gardens, their concave shapes collecting water that nurtures rare ferns and irises. Even the artifacts tell dual stories. A rusted musket barrel unearthed during planting now serves as a stake for a climbing rose, the vine's thorns curling around the metal like living filigree on a relic. Historical sketches from the siege era show a wasteland of churned mud and smoldering debris, the air hazy with smoke. Today, that same vista is a symphony of texture and motion, silver birches swaying where watchtowers once stood, their leaves whispering secrets to the descendants of Ottoman fig trees. Period illustrations depict soldiers digging latrines. Modern visitors photograph butterflies sipping from those very spots, now blooming with nectar-rich salvias. The most striking then and now comparison lies in the water features. Engineers' plans from 1529 show desperate attempts to drain marshland for troop movements. Contemporary maps highlight those same channels repurposed into a circulatory system for the garden, their waters diverted to feed koi ponds and sustain microclimates for endangered alpine plants. Photography captures the transformation in freeze frames. A black and white image from 1890 shows the Cannonball Pavilion half buried in weeds, its ironwork pitted by neglect. The same angle today reveals it draped in clematis, the rusted spheres overhead gleaming like abstract art against the sky. Even the wildlife mirrors the shift. Where siege accounts describe carrion crows feasting on fallen horses, jackdaws now perform aerial ballets, stealing shiny coins from the Sultan's spring to line their nests in the sentinel tower's arrow slits. The garden hasn't erased history, it's given it new vocabulary, translating scars into blossoms, silence into birdsong, and the grim arithmetic of war into the exponential beauty of growth. The true magic lies in the details that bridge eras. Run your palm along the reconciliation hedge, and your fingers will trace both Habsburg hawthorn and Ottoman hazel, their branches grafted so seamlessly they share a single bark. Dig gently near the medicinal beds, and you might uncover a 16th century apricot pit beside a modern seed capsule, separated by centuries but united in purpose. At dusk, when the lanterns flicker to life along paths that follow original siege trench lines, the garden becomes a palimpsest of light and shadow, whispering the same truth in every season, that landscapes, like people, are never just one story. They're layers upon layers of adaptation, where even the deepest wounds can become wells for something extraordinary to take root. You don't need to board a plane to wander the garden's moonlit paths or feel the morning mist rise from the dialogue pool. Technology has woven its magic, bringing this living masterpiece to screens worldwide. Start with a groundbreaking virtual tour, a collaboration between UNESCO and Vienna's digital archivists, which lets you explore every petal and paving stone in hyper-detailed 360 degrees. Glide through the whispering gallery, where your cursor becomes a virtual ear against the stones, picking up faint echoes of the siege engineers' whispers. Zoom in on the cannonball pavilion's rusted spheres until you see the patina of centuries, each fleck of iron oxide telling a story of rain, sun, and time's patient hand. The tour even includes seasonal modes. Switch to winter and watch the garden's bones emerge beneath a digital snowfall, or select a dawn to witness the exact moment sunlight strikes the moon gate's curve, just as Lucas and Kemmel planned 500 years ago. For those craving deeper context, the garden's interactive timeline maps historical layers onto the present landscape. Tap a hotspot near the reconciliation hedge, and augmented reality overlays an Ottoman gardener's sketch from 1532 beside a modern photo of the same spot, the hawthorn and hazel branches now inseparable. Swipe through siege-era blueprints of the water bastion, then tilt your screen to see them dissolve into today's cascading falls. This isn't just armchair tourism, it's time travel, with sliders that let you adjust transparency between past and present, watching cannons morph into flower beds as your finger moves. Documentaries have immortalized the garden's living poetry in motion. The award-winning From Siege to Bloom trails a single fig sapling grown from cuttings carried by Ottoman soldiers as it fruits in Vienna for the first time, interweaving interviews with descendants of both besiegers and defenders. Streaming platforms host bite-sized, micro-seasons episodes tracking daily changes most visitors miss. Jackdaws teaching their young to steal coins for donation boxes, or the precise hour when night tulips unfurl like silk umbrellas. For educators, the garden's YouTube channel offers curated playlists: Botany of Peace for science classes, Architecture of Memory for history buffs, each video ending with discussion prompts that turn screens into virtual classrooms. The most unexpected digital offshoot, a global Seeds of Connection initiative linking sister gardens worldwide through live cams. Tune in at dawn to see Kyoto's moss temples mirrored in Vienna's dew-heavy spiderwebs, or watch Belfast's peace walls bloom in unison with the reconciliation hedge via split-screen feeds. Social media amplifies the garden's reach further, with Instagram filters that graft your selfie onto historic backdrops. Pose as a Habsburg noble admiring the first Ottoman tulips, or a 19th century botanist sketching the Sentinel Tower. Even gaming gets a green-thumbed twist. The Garden Alchemist app challenges players to balance ecosystems by planting virtual species from conflicting cultures, their success measured in harmony points rather than conquests. What makes these digital experiences extraordinary is how they honor the garden's essence while expanding its borders. Virtual visitors from Istanbul can leave voice notes at the Moon Gate, their words joining the whispers of millions before them. A child in Buenos Aires might spot the same rare butterfly in a live stream that a Viennese gardener documents in real time. The garden's caretakers have embraced this digital layer as tenderly as they do the soil, moderating online forums where Syrian refugees share memories of Damascus roses, or hosting global Diggy festivals where participants worldwide synchronize their screens to light virtual lanterns along the siege trenches' ghostly outlines. Technology hasn't diluted the garden's magic. It's multiplied it, creating infinite doorways for connection. Whether you're tracing Ottoman calligraphy on a tablet in Toronto or watching fireflies dance in the Moon Gate's reflection via a live cam in Mumbai, the message remains the same. Beauty grows where we choose to plant it, and no screen can diminish the wonder of roots that stretch across centuries and continents alike. Some say if you stand perfectly still in the garden at twilight, you might catch the scent of Ottoman rosewater and roasted chestnuts, a ghostly whiff of the siege camp's Last Supper. This is just one of the whispers that cling to the hedgerows and pavilions where history blurs into legend. Take the tale of the Moon Gate's missing keystone. Locals swear it was pried loose not by time, but by a lovesick officer who carved his sweetheart's name into the stone before disappearing into the night. To this day, guides point out the faintest heart-shaped shadow that appears on certain evenings, cast by a hidden crevice no mason can explain. Then there's the fable of Kemmel's midnight prune. It's said that every 50 years, when the clock strikes 12 on the summer solstice, the garden's oldest rosebush, a gnarled specimen near the Tier's fountain, blooms with flowers bearing Ottoman script. The markings supposedly spell out lost grafting secrets, visible only until dawn. Botanists dismiss it as pareidolia, but that hasn't stopped generations of apprentices from sneaking in with magnifying glasses, hoping to catch wisdom in petal-formed calligraphy. More chilling are the accounts of the Sentinel Tower's silent patrol. Visitors lingering after closing time sometimes report seeing shadows moving along the upper walkway, not human, but shaped like soldiers shouldering long-gone muskets. The phenomenon has a plausible origin. The tower's iron railings, heated by day and cooled by night, warp subtly to recreate the silhouettes of historical guard postures. Yet when the mist rolls in from the Danube, even skeptics admit the effect is uncanny, as if the stones remember their original duty. Children's favorite legend involves the garden's mischievous jackdaws. Folklore claims these clever birds hoard more than just shiny trinkets. They're said to guard a cache of silver buttons from Ottoman uniforms, plucked from the soil over centuries. Every few years, a lucky visitor spots a jackdaw dropping a tarnished button into the Sultan's spring, where it sinks with a chime-like ripple. Groundskeepers play along, secretly replacing lost uniform fragments to keep the magic alive. The most poignant myth surrounds the Anatolian snowdrops. Elderly Viennese whisper that these fragile white flowers bloom most vigorously after winters of global unrest, their petals thickening during wars or pandemics, as if drawing strength from human sorrow. Scientists attribute it to subconscious selective attention, but that doesn't stop refugees from leaving handwritten prayers beneath the snowdrops each spring, their notes weighted with pebbles from homelands they may never see again. Not all legends are bittersweet. There's the joyous tale of the laughing pear tree, a century-old espalier that supposedly fruited during the darkest days of World War II. Starving citizens swore its pears tasted inexplicably of honey and cinnamon, a miracle later traced to underground sugar deposits from a bombed bakery. Now couples share kisses under its branches, hoping for a sweetness that outlasts hardship. These stories, whether fact or fancy, share a common root: the human need to weave meaning from the land's scars. The garden doesn't correct the myths, it nurtures them like rare seedlings, understanding that folklore is just history with its heart exposed. After all, what's a cannonball pavilion without whispers of alchemy, or a whispering gallery without rumors of star-crossed lovers? The tales grow wilder with each retelling, but their essence remains, a testament to how even the most factual landscapes bloom with mystery when tended by imagination. As we trace our fingers along the garden's weathered stones or pause beneath the dappled shade of its ancient trees, we're not just walking through a landscape, we're moving through layers of time, where every petal holds an echo of resilience. This living masterpiece reminds us that the most breathtaking transformations often begin with broken ground, that seeds of hope can take root in the unlikeliest soil. Consider how the very plants we admire today, the tulips nodding in the breeze, the figs swelling with summer's sweetness, were once carried here as provisions for war, their survival as improbable as the garden itself. There's a quiet audacity in this place, a refusal to let history be defined solely by its moments of conflict. The same hands that once sharpened swords took up pruning shears, the same earth that absorbed cannon fire now cradles fragile snowdrops. This garden doesn't erase its past, it rewrites it, showing us how destruction and creation can exist side by side, how former enemies might become collaborators in something greater than themselves. The Ottoman hazel and Austrian hawthorn grafted together in the reconciliation hedge aren't just botanical curiosities, they're living metaphors, proving that even the deepest divides can heal when tended with patience and vision. Perhaps what lingers most isn't the garden's beauty, but its lesson. That renewal isn't about forgetting, but about finding new meaning in what remains. Those rusted cannonballs suspended like chandeliers in the pavilion, the arrow slits now home to nesting jackdaws, they whisper that objects, like people, aren't bound to a single story. A musket can become a flower stake, a trench can channel life-giving water, and a battlefield can soften into a place where lovers walk hand in hand beneath blossoms that outlasted empires. As the afternoon light slants through the moon gate one final time, casting its perfect circle onto the path ahead, we're left with a question that stretches far beyond these walls. What other transformations might be possible if we dare to see potential where others see only ruins? The garden's true gift isn't just its flowers or fountains, but its stubborn belief in second chances, a belief as perennial as the roses climbing its ancient stones. Share in the comments what this journey has planted in your imagination, and join us next time as we unearth more stories where history and wonder intertwine. Until then, may we all learn to listen for the whispers of growth beneath life's most unexpected surfaces.